My name is Rabbi Eli Meyerfeld, and I'm the CEO at the Holocaust Memorial Center. And today I'm going to be interviewing Dr. and Mrs. Baum. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. And we're going to be talking about their lives in Germany leading up to Kristallnacht. So if I could ask you each to introduce yourselves.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
My name is Rosie Baum. I was born in a place called Wurzburg in Bavaria, in Germany. But I lived most of my life, all my life in Germany, in Schweinfurt, until about 10, 11 years old. Now we live in Southfield, Michigan, and I'm happily married to a man called Henry Baum for a long time. And here he is.
My name is Henry Baum, used to be Heinz, and it was changed when I was naturalized as a US citizen. I was born in Cologne, Germany, anciently in 1927. Now you have to figure out how old I am. And here we are and being interviewed. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the clock. Here we are being interviewed on what we remember on the 10th of November, or what Rabbi Merfeld says, the 9th. It was the 9th and 10th of November, the 9th. What we remember happening to us personally in Germany. I'll let my wife speak first, as usual.
Yes.
So let's first understand, first of all, can I call you, I don't know, can I call you Rosie and Henry? Is that okay?
Yes.
You come from a good Kinderstube.
Okay. So
if you know,
let's start with you, Mrs. Baum. You said you were born in one city, but you really spent most of your time in another. Can you explain to us how you came to be born in Wurzburg if you're really from Schweinfurt?
To the best of my knowledge, my mother went to Wurzburg, where there was a Jewish hospital, and she traveled from Schweinfurt to Wurzburg, which I believe was like 30 or 40 kilometers, to have me there. And then she obviously came back to Schweinfurt, and where we were living. My father, I don't quite know where to start. I'm also pretty ancient. I was born in 1928, and my name used to be Rosie. It is now Rosalind, but everybody still calls me as Rosie. My life in Germany, as you as you asked me, it was difficult, but it wasn't at that time until I was about 10. It wasn't that rough. We went to school. We went to a German school for the first and second grade. We meaning my friends and myself, my 2 or 3 Jewish children, and we were able to cope with it, with the anti-Semitism. They threw stones at us, they threw snowballs at us, they spit at us, but we made it. As soon as school was over, we came home real fast, and we pretty well lived by ourselves and played with each other.
How many Jewish families would you guess lived in Schweinfurt?
I'm guessing again. You must understand, you're asking me questions, but I was 10 years old. Approximately, I was told from hearsay, from whatever, there were 300 to 400 Jewish people in Schweinfurt. How many families, I don't know. It wasn't a big town, but we did have our own rabbi and our own cantor and one synagogue, which was very close to our house. But we'll get to that a little bit later.
Okay. Dr. Baum, can you tell us about your origins in Cologne?
Yes, I was born in a big city rather than a little city. So life was a little bit different. We lived on the 3rd floor in a street called Jülicher Straße. That's Cologne, near on the Rhine. I was born, as I said, in July 1927. And we didn't feel much of anything until about 1936, I say, with 37, one of the incidents that my father told me that I remember very clearly, he was very friendly with a neighbor that lived a floor above us. And one day this neighbor came to my father and says, I'm so sorry. I can no longer speak with you or say good morning or hello to you because my children, especially my son, is in the Hitler Youth and they are being interrogated of what they hear and what they see and what the connections are. And so if they tell, my son will tell whoever it is that is leading that group, that fascist group, that I'm still conversing with a Jew, it will be not too well for me. So therefore I apologize. He apologized. And from then on, there was no more conversation, no more hello or anything else. But that's the environment in which we lived. Generally speaking, we went to school, to a school called Litzerstraße, which was a four-year-old elementary. We went to four-year elementary school, and then Hitler took this over, and then we left and we went to a Yavne later on in the 5th grade. I entered the Yavne, which was a school that was matriculated all the way up to the last semester of the school, which allowed let's put it this way, they gave permission from Oxford for people to enter that school in England without taking an English examination, because that was the language that was taught in the last few grades. I was in the sexta and the quinta, which means the 1st and 2nd grade. Basically, I learned my English grammar in those 2 years, which came to my great stead when we left. So making fast forward, England gave 10,000 visas to children in, I'm sorry?
Yeah, we'll come to it. We'll come to it. Let me ask you more. Were your parents from Cologne?
No, my parents were not from Cologne. My mother was from Wurzburg, where my grandparents lived, which we had visited twice. I remember that. And also my father was in Warsaw. And he came from there and came over to Germany. And strange history, he got a job as selling shoes. And then the shoe owner, who was Jewish, the owner of the business, heard him sing. And then he said, this man has to go to the music school in Cologne, which was the Jewish Gürzenich music school. He graduated and he finally was offered a job in 3 countries, Germany, Holland, and Sweden. No, Copenhagen, in Copenhagen, which was Denmark, as the cantor there, but he took the job in Germany, and this is where I grew up and we grew up.
So you said that your mother is from a town. What country is that? What Slavics?
Slavic is also in Poland. It is a little bit up the river. It's near the Vistula, which is called in German the Weichsel, the river Weichsel. I remember that very clearly because we went on vacation there twice to visit my grandparents. I was privileged to see now, 7 or 8 generations. My great grandfather was lying once near the bed when we came on vacation. He slept there in the afternoon on the Sabbath. That was his way of sleeping. I came in and I screamed because I thought he had died. And of course, they told me that that's how he usually sleeps. So I saw him, I saw my grandfather, I saw my father. I am one of the generations. My son, thank God, is here. My grandson has now become a grandfather. You can go from there.
Wow. So your parents came to Germany in what year?
My father came to Germany in 1919 or 1920, somewhere around there. He sneaked through the border with a fake pass because the Germans were still stopping people. He had a pass which actually said what time Shabbos was, a little state. It was night, and so they were driven through there, and the Germans stopped them. And so they said, show your pass. And he did. And he showed that pass quickly. And they said, okay, go ahead. They didn't check it. He came and then he was, they married. My mother came over. There was a marriage brought together by somebody else. My mother came over in 1922, I believe, or 3, I'm not quite sure. They were married in Cologne in the shul, in the synagogue in which my father was a cantor. And we were born soon after that. He also did one thing that was fabulous. He brought his parents over from Poland. We never could have been very rich, so it was there, but they died rather early, one in 1923, one in 1924, I believe. And they're still buried in Bocklemünde, which is the burial place for the Großgemeinde in Cologne, the cemetery.
So did you have siblings, Doctor?
I had a brother who died within 7, 8 days of childbirth. I had a sister. My sister was 2 years older than I am, Margot. She later married a boyfriend she remembered from Cologne, Leo Munk's son, Willy Munk. She married and they lived in England and later on came over to the United States, and I sort of followed them a little bit later.
So I don't want to jump too far ahead, but Monk's Synagogue in London, how are they related to the synagogue that's named Monk's?
Gold Street, that monk is a cousin to
the monk that is there. They're all, every monk is somehow or somewhere related. They're from what we call the priestly family, called the Kohen. They're from the priestly families. They're all related. He was a metal dealer in Cologne, and
his
father. And they came over. They had a visas. He and his wife had visas to come over with their children. They had 3, I believe. And my sister got to know him in England, where she was in a hostel, and they got married.
Okay. How much difference in age was Margot than you?
2 years.
Older?
She was 2 years old.
Rosie, let me ask you, did you have any siblings?
Yes, I did. I have an older sister, 7 years older than I, by the name of Senta. She also came on the Kindertransport shortly after I did, in July of 39. And she came to England and she was also with her family. And I'm sorry.
No.
She lived with this family. It didn't work out too well. Then she became a nurse and she had a different unhappy experiences. But well, thank God she died when she was 81 in England, and she got married to a Dr. Bach, and they had a life. They did not have any children, and they did a lot of good things at the end. They actually went to Africa, to a place in East Africa, Tanganyika. I don't know what it's called now. Where Tanzania, where she and her husband, they what they called, they were in the English colonial service.
Excuse me, he was a dentist, and
he worked
for the government, and the government sent him over there for the colonial department.
And she was a tropical nurse, and they gave a lot of shots, and they stayed there for 4 years, helping people, natives, or whoever lived there. I don't have too many
until the independence was declared for that country.
Could be, yes.
Okay, so each of you mentioned, but I want to ask you a little more about the synagogue that you went to in your hometown, what you remember about it. So Rosie, could you start? Tell me about the synagogue in Schweinfurt.
The synagogue has wonderful memories and the worst memories of my life.
So we'll come to 39 in a moment, but first tell me about your happy memories.
Before 39, between the beginning of my life, my father was also a cantor of the synagogue, and we happened to have lived right next door to the synagogue. So my whole life was centered around the synagogue. When my father should go to synagogue, when he comes home, when he has to go to school, when he comes home. The synagogue was a beautiful, I loved it. People were very happy with the synagogue. It was a center of Jewish life. People came there to social halls and they talked and they conversed and they had classes, and it was a center of I don't know, it's like a Jewish center nowadays.
He was a teacher also in the non-Jewish Lyceum,
Yeah,
which is a girls' school, a girls'
Thank you.
Graduating school. He was a teacher there. He was an artist by himself, and he made fabulous silver work, which we are still in possession of, That is the Seder plate. He was an artist. He was a cantor. He was a musician. He wrote beautiful letters, which we still have, some of them. He was an exceptional person.
yes, thank you. Thank you for the good feeling. He was also a community leader. People were forever at our houses.
Excuse me for interrupting, but my statement should really say he must have been, because I never had the privilege of knowing him.
Thank you. You were saying people always came to the house.
He always were lining up and asking, they want to talk to what they call Lehrer Baum, teacher Baum. They asked him questions. He wrote letters for them. He decided for them what to do. Shall we get married? Shall we not get married? Shall we move to this place? Shall we move? They were ever asking him questions. I presume though, really and truly, once again, I was a kid of 10 years old. We didn't have too much conversation in that neighborhood with my parents.
Okay.
But very basically good memories. He was a fun father and he was a fun teacher. He later taught us when we couldn't go to the German schools anymore. He opened up a school room in our house in that huge big building, which I thought it was a huge big building. It's probably now as big as a molehill. But he had classes there for all the kids from first grade through the 10th to 11th grade, all the way up. And he was able to teach. How, I don't know. But we all got taught and we all went through. And we even got taught English somewhat. All of it, we could speak. I could speak at least 6 words when I came to England.
Tell me his name again. Tell us your father's name.
My father's name was Arthur, Arthur Berlinger, Berlinger. It was also, the Berlinger families is also one of these 3 or 4 or 5 families in Bavaria who, if you are Berlinger, you seem to be something. It was a step up. I don't know why, but
Let me add a little bit to this. Today there is in existence 3 independent books of the Stammbaum, of the tracing the history of your family.
Yeah.
And it goes back all the way to David Hameller, to King David. I mean, it's substantiated not just by saying they are, but each family is children, the father, this father, that father, that father. It goes all the way down. And it was written by 3 independent scholars who wrote these books, and they're in existence today. And when one of our grandchildren ever gets married, our eldest son Michael always says, "You are now number so and so," because these things are numbered in the book. He says to the newcomer, "This is your number now."
19.
So I'm talking to royalty.
Yes, something like that.
It is. They weren't actually truly. Berlinger was an original name there. They were in a city called Berlichingen. I'm not pronouncing it correctly. Somewhere also in
The name
Bavaria,
must have come from there.
and they got the name from them. It went back to 1500.
That the city went.
So Dr. Baum, tell us about the synagogue in your hometown in Cologne.
There were three synagogues in Cologne. One was from the Gemeinde, which was a unit that was in charge of two synagogues. One was a Reform, and one was what you called that was the Orthodox. And my father never took me or let me go into the Reform synagogue, but that is today in the Cologne in the Hohenstraße. And instead of a Reform synagogue, it has now become the Orthodox synagogue, but it was destroyed, as we later on on the 10th of November. And then he was in the Oberkantor. He became the Oberkantor, which means the chief cantor, in the Glockengasse, which was the shul. You could see that shul all over Cologne. Hitler took away the things, but there were couplets on top that were gilded with gold, and they were shining, and it was like a dome all over in that synagogue, and he was the cantor there. It had 4 women galleries, actually 6, 5 of them used by the ladies, and one was used by a choir, which had about 30 or 40 boys and about 20 men. And the cantor at the bottom used to sing together with the choir, quite a feat, by the way, but they did it, and it usually landed up in the same tone. So he was excellent. He had a tremendous voice. He graduated from Gürzenich, and he could have been in the opera. And in fact, he had an offer to go to the Cologne Opera at the same time that Hitler finally closed down any chances for any Jewish person to be anywhere.
And in Cologne, were there also small synagogues besides these large ones?
And unfortunately, I'm sad to say, my father never took me there. But off the other side of the I forget the real name of the square, where the little Stiebler, Thibautgasse, I think, was one of the streets in which there were many of them there. I did not know them. I had never visited them. Unfortunately, I would have liked to, because my son-in-law's father was brought up in that area, in those synagogues, and he married our daughter, and I hear little things about it, but that was it. I just remember one thing in the square where there was a bank, and you could go in there, and you could go only with your handkerchief, and there was a fountain there that on top of it sprayed the eau de Cologne, which was 4711. 4711 was the headquarters of eau de Cologne, which was facing our synagogue, the Glockengasse. That's why
That was the address.
Pardon?
That was the address?
Yes.
Of the perfume factory.
The number.
That was their address, yes. 4711 was their number. That was why.
Fascinating.
You can still buy the perfume, by the way, 4711. You can still get that. Anyway.
Okay, so we have a sense then of where you grew up. So I want to ask you now about your memories leading up to November 38, before we talk about Kristallnacht itself. So you said that you had some experience with being chased, being called names, but then you also said that you were thrown out of the public schools and you had to go to a Jewish school. What other experiences did you have leading up to?
We walked, in Europe, especially in Cologne, to get for us to take a tram ride, as we call it, the tram, was a luxury. We walked. It was about a 20-minute walk to go to shul. And we usually went in 2 or 3s into the Yavne school, which was what they called here the high school. And we worked because the Hitler youth, when they saw us, these kids, 16, 17, we got beaten up once in a while. So we took different routes and different ways to go there. And we managed usually to get there in the whole skin, so to say. But it was dangerous, always was. And it became even more dangerous when next door to the Yavne, which was the school, they built up the Gestapo headquarters of Cologne. So when we went out to play, we no longer could make a noise. They complained about this, and everything that we did was wrong. So we were allowed to go out, but we could only talk softly, never raised our voices or anything else. I was in that school for 2 years. It's called the Sexta and Quinta, which is the 5th and 6th grade, I guess. I learned what, and I think I mentioned this, the thing that I learned mostly was the basic grammar to speak English. I couldn't speak a word of English. I could only say hello, good morning, goodbye, whatever it is. But as I learned English in England when we came over there, which is the latest thing, this helped me to learn the language much faster than it would have otherwise have taken.
In other words, learn the grammar.
Oh, learn grammar by
all means.
Old-fashioned grammar is always good to know.
So you said that your parents were not from Germany. So
no,
as an American, I'm used to the idea that when a foreigner comes, they become citizens. How did it work in Germany?
Yeah, you know, I always tell the same story. Somebody says, well, you're a Yeki, you know. Really, I'm not, because I'm Polish. And then I always say what really happened. I say, the story that I always say is, when a cat goes into a fish store and has a litter, would you call him kippers? Or would you call him a cat? So when a Polish person came to Germany, it was physically almost impossible to get naturalized. We were Polish. We were always Polish, and my wife was German. She was generationally back German. That's what every chasana of our children, I always start off with a saying that under normal circumstances, your wedding should never have taken place.
Our wedding.
No, their wedding.
Yeah.
Because, as Kipling says, east is east and west is west, and never the twain shall meet. But that was all changed by Hitler.
So how did your parents fare differently because they were not German citizens?
Because, yes, my father walked to shul with the Rav, very lovely person. Later on, he became later on the Rav Dunner. It's a relative of the Rav Dunner who is the head person in England now. He became the rabbi. They worked together. But Polish and German Jews did not mix. Oil and water did not mix.
I don't know.
But
So,
now,
I never felt this.
because she's...
So tell me, under Hitler, though, how was your father treated? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, in Rosie's city, there was no Polish Jews there. There's nothing to know. That's the difference.
As Hitler took power,
Son?
As Hitler took power, how did that affect your father and your mother?
Well, it affected my father immediately. He could not get a job at the German opera, for which he had been offered a job. Affected us. We were brought up to, my mother was very musical, and she took us, not my father didn't go along, never, but she took us to see opera. And just a little incident, she started it very carefully, very beautifully. You would do this to children, they would enjoy that music. It started off with the Gypsy Baron. Anyway, progressively more detailed and better, until she came. She wanted to take us to the Wagner's Meistersinger. She came to the office, and it must have been 1936. And they said, I'm sorry, we cannot sell tickets to Jews.
And was your father able to continue to work in Germany as the Nazis took over?
He was able to continue as a chazan, as a cantor, until the year 1938. I believe on the 28th, some say 20, the difference doesn't matter. At the end of October, it was on a Friday, to my knowledge, the best of my knowledge. Just by off chance, usually my father was in the synagogue in the morning, But this time he somehow or other stayed at home. He was praying, doing his morning prayers at home. Two Gestapo officers came. They said, we are here to see your passport. And he gave it to them and he said, you have until 12 o'clock noon to pack a little bag or suitcase that you can carry. You will have to appear at this station, at this particular part. And from there, he was deported to Poland. I never saw him again. My sister saw him again because he was allowed to come back for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, to finish off his whatever he had left in Germany. And then he and my mother were taken back in about May or June in 1940, before the war. No, 1939. This was 1939. Yeah, in June 1939, he and my mother went back, and they went back to my grandparents' house in Wrocław.
Okay, so Rosie, your parents were German citizens.
Yes.
How did your family, how were they impacted as the Nazis? Did you still go out? Did you visit friends? Did you travel?
Yes, we still went out. We visited friends who lived there.
No.
Well, not too much.
No, not you. I.
Okay.
You did.
We did go out of the house, but not too much. As I say, we did miss it. My grandmother lived in Wurzburg, and we went to visit her every Sunday or every second Sunday. And I am not aware so much as things having changed. Maybe I was living in a cocoon. Possibly I was, but I was not so much aware. We did have a lady who, a living maid, is it?
Yeah, living in Maine.
Who lived there, and in 38 or somewhere around there, she said she had to go. She can't work for us anymore. So I noticed that, but I must admit, I'm very sorry. Either I wasn't observant or I was too young, but I am not as sharp as Heidi is, my husband. I cannot possibly give you such a wonderful resume of what happened between 0 and 10 as he is.
So I want to come now to the discussion of the 9th and 10th of November, 1938. So first, Dr. Baum, Heinz, can you tell me what you remember from those days of Kristallnacht?
Excuse me.
Well, you know what triggered Kristallnacht? Let's first understand this. Von Rath was murdered in Paris by a Jewish person, and Goebbels went in the air and he said that the Germans are, what is the name? I can't even think of the name. They're empörd is the German word for it.
They're upset.
They're terribly upset. And that started the riots on the night. The first thing that we knew about it, because my mother and my sister and I were alone, my father had already been deported. And we were alone. The first we knew about it was in the morning when somebody came running to our apartment and said to her, Frau Baum, Mrs. Baum, do not let your children go to school because they're burning down the synagogues. And that's exactly what happened. They burned down the Glockengasse, which was my father's synagogue, totally destroyed it, a beautiful, beautiful building, unbelievably so. Thank goodness I at least have pictures of before and after. And the synagogue in the Yavne, which was the Austrittsgemeinde, which was the most religious of them all, that was destroyed, and all the Torahs, the 5 books, which are the holy things that we have, were taken out, were burnt, and but this we only heard about later. All we knew is don't send your children to school. And my mother took that advice and we stayed home. And we waited all day long, because we know that the Nazis were going from house to house, destroying property. And it came to close to 6 o'clock, they came to our house. Yes, they did damage to our house. We all huddled around our mother, they destroyed furniture, but then Goebbels came on the air, and at 6 o'clock sharp, everything was done so perfectly on time. And he says, well, they have now vented their feelings, now everything is stopped. And sure enough, they left exactly on that time. And that's all we experienced during that day.
Terrible. Everything they did was on time. Sickening.
Yeah.
Rosie, tell me what you remember.
Oh, you got the right part.
You know, I'm going from hot to cold, from cold to hot. I cannot turn on November the 10th, Kristallnacht. I'm trying to explain something to you. This is a piece of crystal. Can you see it? It's crystal glass, but the Germans like noise, and the more noise, the more the more that they could scream at each other and break things, the happier they were. That's why it was really Kristallnacht. They went from house to house breaking things. They went from store to store breaking shop windows, etc., etc. But I'm trying to get back to myself, to my own story of Schweinfurt. Our shul was also the nicest thing I can remember. I also have pictures from before and after. On the morning of the Kristallnacht, 10th of November, whenever I talk about it, I just can't turn it off. I get sweaty. I get perspire under my arm. My whole life, my whole being turns over. It was years and years. Once I got to England, and then I came to America, I used to fast on November the 10th because it was a day that I will never forget as long as I live. It was the worst one, the worst day I could imagine of my life. So please forgive me. It'll take me a few seconds just to think about it.
I understand.
I woke up that morning, November the 10th, in my parents' bedroom because my sister was finished high school. She did her abitur and she went to a finishing school, and I was afraid to sleep alone. Therefore, I slept in my parents' house, in my parents' room, my parents' bedroom. I woke up that morning when my father was, I guess, getting ready either to get dressed. There were 2 Gestapo people in the room. My mother was also there, of course, and I believe she was dressed. I don't even know that. And my father came over to me and he kind of patted me on my head, and he said, "Bye-bye, I'll hope to see you soon, or I'll see you soon." But I couldn't comprehend exactly what he said to me. And he left. And my mother got dressed, and from about early on till about 10, 11 o'clock of that day, it was vague. I don't know, it was like a gray area in my mind. However, at 11 o'clock, all hell broke loose. The Germans, the SR, and I think the brown shirts, as I told you, we lived in a house right next to the shul, and there was a passageway.
Next to the synagogue.
Next to the synagogue, yes. There was a passageway between our house and the synagogue, and there were, I don't know, let's say 50 people, 50 to 100 of these as wild people walked through this passageway into the shul, and they put it on fire. Now you must understand, this fire was about maybe 20 yards from our house. And all of a sudden, this shul, I was looking out, this shul was burned, was burning. And they were all dancing around. It was just as you read in the books. And they were dancing around and screaming at each other. They took out the towers, they took out the benches, they made like a trapeze? What is it?
TP.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, something like it. And they put
You're banging on the table.
What?
You're banging on the table.
I'm sorry. They were dancing around, having a good time. It was they were having this screeching noise. They let out all their venom, I suppose, maybe more. One of these German people took one of these sticks from the benches and threw it at the bottom of our house on the first floor. We lived on the second floor, and this caught on fire. And I'm saying it as if it's like a storybook, but it isn't. It happened to me. I can feel it. I can see it. They put our house. The bottom was burning. My mother and I was on the second floor. And can you imagine, as you're looking out of the house, out of your window, and there was fire there, and all people, all these, I don't know, I don't want to say they're ugly, but they're terrible people with venom, with hate, with hate to you. They come down, they're screaming at you, and they're saying, "Come on down, you dirty Jew. Come on down. We'll make hackfleisch out of you." Hackfleisch is mincemeat. Yeah. Come on down. And you stand there, and I was hold on to my mother's skirt or something, or to a dress. I said, "Mommy, what are we gonna do?" This is. The more I think about it, it was gruesome. It was hateful. It was terrible. It was the scariest thing of my life. And all my mother answered was, "I don't know. I don't know." She was lots of words, didn't know what to tell me. We just couldn't understand the whole thing. But there it is. It was staring us in the face. What is it? Where did we come? And she said, "I don't know." And then she really, that's like, I'm saying it to you, it is a true story. She said to me, "Rosie, I don't know, but we have to say Shema. Shema Yisrael is the most precious prayer a Jew can say to God above." And believe me, otherwise I wouldn't be sitting talking to you people. Otherwise I wouldn't be sitting here. Otherwise I would be somewhere else. And somebody came down the street, our street, right in front of our house, and they also screamed out, "This house is, don't you see, they're private people. This house shouldn't be burned. The synagogue behind has to be burned." And you know what? Those people, or the fire brigade or somebody, they put the fire out. The house was, we were standing there, and they themselves put the house out, put the fire out. Really, that's it. And that's why I'm here, and the rest is history. But I do want to say something. I think my sister mentioned to me years and years later, that person who said, put out the fire, was some sort of something in the government, not in the government, in the municipality of Schweinfurt. And I understand that he killed himself sometime. He committed suicide, but I don't know whether it's true. I don't even know his name, but it's just a gruesome situation where people turn from one, they're human beings, and next thing they become animals. I don't know, some nice, they become people, things that we cannot recognize. What else shall I say? Thank God I'm here and I'm able to talk to you.
Do you remember what happened in your life after this? So the fire went out, and
my mother?
Your mother was still home.
My mother was taken away, as I told you that morning, by the two Gestapos, and he went to Dachau concentration camp.
He was allowed to come back.
He was allowed to come back. This was November the 10th. He was allowed to come back before Hanukkah, which is around Christmas, I think, towards the end of the year. Because So I understand again, he was a soldier in World War I. Can you imagine? Here he was fighting us, me. It's like it was an abnormal situation.
Excuse me for interrupting. He had the same medal that Hitler had received.
Yuppie-doo.
Yes, but that was the medal that allowed him to come out.
He was allowed to come out, and he came out Hanukkah time, and he said, we have to get out of here. And he did everything in his power for them to get out. We were able, my sister was able to go on this kinder transport to England. Thank God. Thank to the English community, to the world. They opened their doors to 10,000 kids. We were one of them. My husband was one of them. My sister was one of them. And a lot of good people were with them. We were safe. But my parents from there went to Theresienstadt in 42. They had to leave Schweinfurt, and from Theresienstadt, in 43, shortly, or 44, excuse me, shortly before the end of the war, they went on to cattle train, or cattle, whatever, cattle, one of these huge things that you have in the Holocaust Center, to Auschwitz. And from there, they went up to God, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
So they lived in Schweinfurt until 1942?
1942, September.
And they sent both of their children away in 1939.
Yeah, my sister, I went in April, and Santa went in July, 2 months before war broke out.
Did they talk to you about the plans to have you go to England?
To me, they did not talk too much. They talked, of course, you're going to go to England and you're going to pave the way, and we hope to join you, and you're lucky you'll be able to speak English to all the people. And
They were in contact with your foster parents.
That's another thing. We were one of these, I suppose, lucky people who knew, my parents knew to whom we were going to whom I was going to. It was a family called, excuse me, I'm sorry, Broders, Jack and Faye Broder. They lived in North London. And they decided they had 2 boys, and Auntie Faye, as I called her, when I got there, she said she wanted a little girl. So she picked me. And
what made you volunteer?
I'd like
to interject something.
I'd like to interject something for a moment, please. The rabbi of his shul, of this person's shul, talked and said, it is our obligation to adopt a child from Europe. They have a visa to come. We have to do this. And they weren't rich. In fact, they were very poor. He was a shepherd. But he came home. He said, we are going to adopt a child. They put their name on it. They got the name of Rosie, and they contacted the father, and they were in some communication between her father and Mr. Broder, and she was able to come over and see that family.
I have letters where they are in contact. It's mind-boggling how a parent was able to send a child away. It's beyond any thought anybody can have. The sacrifice that they did. This is the whole reason why we're both here is because of our parents. That's why we're here. But I want to tell you, my father or my parents, they had some sort of a form to fill out, and they checked off at the top, Orthodox or not Orthodox, or whatever you want. And they checked up an Orthodox person, and I thank God I was lucky. I got into an Orthodox home. And I lived
what language did they write back and forth?
Yes, they did. I have the letters.
In what language?
Father learned English.
My father learned one or 2 letters in English. It's really, I guess it's funny, but he must have tried very hard. but he wrote in German, but I haven't translated. I read them. You know, when I read these letters on Yom Kippur, I have about
The letter that
50
he gave you.
there
when
are
you
50 or
left.
100 letters, and I try to read them. I don't usually get very far. I can't make it through. But there are letters which are mind-boggling. They tell you more of life, of how a parent goes through, what they do, how do they feel. He says to them, I'm giving up my not my love, my responsibility of bringing up a child, and here I'm giving it to you. We hope she's going to give you nachos. What's that in English?
So it gives you
Pleasure.
So after Kristallnacht, Dr. Baum, what did your father you didn't see again?
No, I did
How
not
did
see.
your mother make this momentous decision to send you to England?
Okay, this was quite. My mother had an uncle and an aunt, especially an uncle who was a shochet. He slaughtered the ritual slaughtering of chickens and so forth for Jewish families, and that was of course forbidden. And they had a permit to go to America. They had a visa. They were lucky. In other words, you needed somebody to vouch for you in America so that you can come over. That way they got a visa. He was given away to the Gestapo that he was still slaughtering correctly, according to Jewish law, and he had a court case, so to say, at the Gestapo headquarters on Yom Kippur, on the holiest day of our calendar, so to say. And on that day, he told his family, his wife and 3 children, take anything that you can, put into your pockets, no suitcases, anything else, go separately to the station and take a train. And they were fortunate to get out, and they land on Yom Kippur, on that 10th day of our month, the holiest day we have. They boarded the Normandy, the ship from Holland to go to America. But coming back to this, my mother sought advice from my uncle. And she said, we have now here visas or certificates that allow 10,000 children to come here. They have been chosen. There were pictures sent to England. My mother had sent our pictures to England. Our pictures, my sister and mine, were chosen. And she said, shall I send my children away or not? And without hesitation, he said, send them away. And she did, she listened, and we were here. And I think I want to recall the story at the station where a child was on the train that I was on. She was leaning out the window and crying to her father, I don't want to go, I don't want to go, I don't want to go. And he took her out of the window and kept her.
Yeah, he pulled out.
That is a doomsday story. I don't know what happened to them, but one can guess. There's nothing much that could change that. We came and we went, I went at least at that time. We went through Hook of Holland. Once we crossed the Holland border, people came to greet us, and they knew we were on the train, and there was hot chocolate with cakes and so forth. We went from Hook of Holland to Harwich, and from there, different places.
So your mother alone had to make this decision to send the 2 of
Yes.
you away. Your
Yes.
uncle was her brother?
Her uncle was her aunt was my grandmother's sister.
Oh, so not your uncle, your great uncle.
Yes, her uncle.
And what year did they leave to America?
1939 Yom Kippur.
So
No, I'm
Yeah.
1939. 1930 Yom Kippur.
and you left in April or May 1939.
Yes.
Wow.
some young British.
But no, I'm a little confused now. They left, I don't know the exact date, but they left before me.
Oh,
So it
before.
was 38.
38 or early 39, whatever it was. They left early. I left right after Pesach in the Passover holiday. We went on the transport in 1940.
No, you went left
Oh,
39.
we left again, 1939. Sorry. It's old, just forgive me, it's old age, that's all.
Yeah.
We only heard, go ahead, Rosie.
My husband came in May 39 and I came to England, both of us, in March of 39, like
Something.
2 weeks apart. For years and years and years, we thought we came on the same transport. Some romantic notion. However, your wonderful librarian gave us the facts and took out all the good things.
If any facts can be found out, your lovely, beautiful, wonderful, one-of-a-kind librarian
intelligent
is able to do that.
Yeah, it's a real talent. We only told a bit of your stories today, but I want to thank you for sharing them. And before we finish, I just want to ask if there's anything else you'd like to say for the people who are watching, anything that you'd like to say to them before we finish.
Yeah.
You know, there are two things that I always like to say. Number one is, it's a saying, my wife says she never had an education, I did. And I want to say, I read two things. One very beautiful, very short. Education is something that remains with you long after specific knowledge has been forgotten. And that's something that I can say to what we remember at home, the basis of our religion, the basis of our feelings, the basis of our belief are right there that we had from home. Was it destroyed part of the time? Was it interrupted, better still, part of the time? Yes, it was.
Yes, it was.
But basically, it came back and it came back and it came back. And that's what has made our lives, and that's what we remember. And that's what we are grateful to our parents, that in 10, 11 years, they were able to instill in us really what a Jewish person should feel like, should act like, and should be like.
Thank you very much.
I want to really say, I want to integrate that. My husband couldn't, I couldn't have said it better. We have to thank our parents. We have, beyond anything they did, the sacrifice they made to let us go and to be able to get out of that hell. I cannot put it into words.
Just
Please.
Finish off with a question and ask your listeners, or whoever has called you. Imagine your parents are told, send your children away to somewhere where you have no idea where they're going, and when you have maybe no chance of seeing them again. How many would do so?
It was an act of heroism.
How many people would part with their kids?
Wow. I want to thank both of you for sharing your stories, and I want to thank everybody who's joining us to listen. And this is a tremendous opportunity, what you said, to make sure to continue that education that each of us needs to have, not just about the specifics, but about the ideas behind them. So thank you very much for spending the time with us today. We really appreciate your time. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
You too.